Okay, I promised to go through how I would answer a question, a typical exam question, under the time constraint of an exam, and we've got the question here, so I'm going to, without further ado, show you what I would do. So my clock's just going up to 22 minutes past 5, and so I'll give myself 9 minutes from now. So first of all, I'm going to read the question, obviously. Your manager has informed you that a client wishes you to calculate a best estimate reserve for a new class of business, pet insurance, that they have just started writing. They do not have their own data for this class of business, but a colleague of yours has given you the data shown above right from one of his pet insurance clients. Discuss the issues you would need to consider regarding using this data to help you calculate reserves for your client. Okay. Well, as we did in the lesson, the first thing I'm going to do is look at the actual data, and I've got this key feature at the end, so I'm going to put in several observations about that, and I'll also have noticed the fact there's 5 marks here, so I probably want to make 10 sensible points, and I've got about 9 minutes to do that. Okay, so the first point is there is a spike in the data at 800. This could be for several reasons. It could be that there is a risk excess of loss insurance policy in place and all payments over 800 are reinsured. This is unlikely as reinsurance tends to be for much larger amounts. Another possibility we discussed was the spike could be because the data has been grouped in this way, i.e. all the claims above 800 have simply been grouped together, and it could be because there is a limit to the cover in the policy, so that the policy does not pay out above 800. This is also unlikely as vet fees may be much more than this, and so it would not be a very good policy. Okay, so I've got 3 marks down there, and I've got hopefully I've now got 1.5 marks. And what else do I notice about the data? Well, the data is negatively skewed and peaks at around £100. This is typical of many general insurance claims distributions. However, the data is also grouped into large groups, buckets of £50, and it may be that if we had the original data, we would be able to fit a better loss distribution. Now, I also want to go on and think about other things. So I've got other general things I can think about. This data could relate to a sales channel different to our own, in which case the relevance to our own policy is very limited. Other things I can think of there may have been particular relations of risk in this policy period, such as a dog flu outbreak, which would make this data unrepresentative. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. So I really want to make 3 more points here. And what else can I do? A really important one, the policy structure will almost certainly be different, and so simply pay out different amounts and have different features. But I'm going to make this into an extra point. Looking at the data, it could be that there is no cover for liability, for example, as there is no tail to the distribution. Another, thinking about insurance concepts more generally, as this is a new type of policy, there could be run-off claims that have not appeared in this data as yet. So there we go. I've had 6.5 minutes so far on this question, and I've now made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 points. So, and each of those I'm looking at, a reasonable point for half a mark. Can I squeeze other points out of it? As I said in the lecture, we've grouped the data. Just put this back again. We've grouped the data here in such a way that does this represent 0 claims, or does it represent 0 to 50, or does it represent 0 to 25? So the data grouping is ambiguous and could lead to errors of up to a magnitude of £50 per claim. And so we've got 1 minute left. I've made 12 points for a five mark question, so that's probably plenty. And you'll often think of different things yourself. For example, the policies could be sold in different countries. It might be that it's only America where they've got any data, as pet insurance has been around for a long time, and therefore have different cultures. And a big one we missed out is vet costs. Inflation is probably higher than normal inflation and difficult to assess, so we would need to build extra margins into the reserves. Okay, so I've had my 9 minutes now. I'm going to stop there. We can discuss briefly what we've got there. But as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, possibly 14, although you could say that the top point is basically just an introduction to the next 3 points. But I've got 13, 14 points there. Each point I'm writing down, I'm looking hopefully to make half a mark for. So if 10 of those points hit the mark scheme, and the mark scheme will be fairly flexible, then basically I've got full marks for the question. And you see there's really two different areas to the question. The first area is looking at the data you've got. What can I say from that data? So in a sense, it's giving me marks. So I've got this spike I can get marks out of. I've got this distribution. Didn't actually mention that it looks like a log normal distribution, so perhaps could have got an extra mark for that. I could possibly have got a mark out of, questioning why there's this sort of volatility here. Is that statistically significant? I could mention statistical tests we could do. We could look at the sort of normal approximation to the Poisson and compare that one with that and see if there was a statistically significant variation. So there's a potentially extra mark there. But the point is, when they give you this sort of information, they're giving you marks. You've got this piece of information here, you've got the norm distribution, you've got how it is bucketed together, you've got that there's a large claim frequency here. So I turned that into a mark by saying we could have had more refined data, more split down into smaller intervals. So you've got a lot of marks that you're given, and then you go on to look at all the things that you could just generally make out of any point. So different sales channel. Now perhaps there I could have explained that the data historically could have been perhaps sold at the supermarket, whereas now perhaps it would be more likely to be sold at online with a price comparison. So I could expand that point, but it's fairly clear what that means. Explain how an accumulation of risk might make a difference. So it might be unrepresentative if there's been a particular accumulation. And here, I don't know if there's any such thing as dog flu, in all fairness, but it just illustrates the point of how an accumulation of risk might occur in the case of pet insurance. Don't just mention accumulation of risk in general. Mention how it might occur in the case of pet insurance, and explain why that's relevant to this particular problem. The policy structure is a classic one. Anything like pet insurance, house insurance will have very different structures. Each policy will have its own little nooks and crannies. Some policies will have sort of fixed benefits, to compensate yourself for the emotional hurt of losing a pet. Perhaps some policy will just cover veterinary fees. Some policy will cover liability. So again, it's an easy point to make. And again, this is quite a nice point, because I've actually thought about the point above about different structures and said how that particularly looks like it could be relevant in this particular policy. There's no claims above £800. It could be that there is simply no liability in the policy, and it's just a veterinary fees cover. So again, relate that back to the actual data you're given and the question. And another simple sort of classic point you can make, there could be claims that have not run off yet and therefore not appeared in the data. So this data might have been all written in the last it might have all been written in the last 5 years, so perhaps that's the only data available, in which case long-term liability claims may not have all have appeared in the data yet. So again, you would be underrepresenting the amount of claims you're going to get. So there's a lot of points there you can make. And really, really important that you think in terms of every idea you generate, explain with a sentence, and that you should be aiming to get half a mark with each point. And there, we can get possibly 7 marks in the time for a 5-mark question. Now I could have gone on and made more points. I could have chiseled down in more detail, but for a 5-mark question, that's a decent answer, and you could reasonably expect to get full marks for that in the exam. And if you bear in mind that you've only got to get 65% or thereabouts to get the exemption, then it shouldn't be too difficult to do. So hopefully that illustrates the point. And I'll stop recording now, and then I'll do a separate video with the other questions I gave you.